Okay, so welcome to this masterclass in GPSR, Mastering Risk Assessment for Consumer Products. My name is Roberth Jonsson, and I'll just share my screen real quick. There we go. Yes, so this is it. And who am I? Well, I am the co-founder of 24-Hour AR. And one of the co-founders of 24-Hour AR. I also run a consultancy within compliance, so basically product compliance, where we work within various fields as consultants. So I have a long history of providing services within this field. So today we will discuss basically risk assessments and why is this important and what is our relationship with this? Well, basically, I do risk assessment for a wide range of products, everything from large industrial facilities to smaller consumer products, such as the ones we will discuss today, but also everything in between. So toys, personal protective equipment, electrical devices, and so on. And it's basically a core of what we do, as in every product needs a risk assessment, and as soon as we work with a product, then that is an important part of the project as such. So this is what we will do today. We will look at brief introduction, technical requirements, risk assessment, how to use the template we use. We also discuss risk assessment, a case study. So first, introduction. What is the new GPSR? Well, the GPSR came into force on December 30th, 2024. It replaced the current General Product Safety Directive, the GPSD. And the aim of this regulation is to guarantee the safety of consumer goods sold via any sales channel, be it offline or online. The GPSR applies to products that are placed or made available on the market. Insofar, there are no specific provisions with the same objectives under a union law which regulate the safety of the products concerned. So basically, this is quite a big scope, and we will look more into that soon. Recently, there's been a published FAQ from the Commission, and that says even increases the scope even further. So it says the GPSR applies to all types of products, physical or digital products too, including software that are placed or made available on the EU single market. In the actual regulation, it doesn't mention digital products, software as such. It only mentions items, but this is a clear indication from the Commission what they are intending with this General Product Safety Regulation. So what this means is that this is a catch-all directive, and basically, if there are risks with a product and those risks are not covered by other legislation, the GPSR or the previous GPSD applies, and it requires the product to be safe and the risk shall be mitigated. So as an example, a machine would not have additional requirements on risk assessment coming from this regulation, because there are already requirements on risk assessment for machinery. But for other products, such as electronic devices, where there has not been a clear distinction or requirement before, then these kind of requirements will be added on top of the current requirements that are laid on that product. So what are the main changes to this, to the regulation? Well, first, each product that is covered by the regulation needs to have a responsible economic operator within the EU. This can be an EU-based manufacturer, it could be an importer, it could be an authorized representative, or a fulfillment service provider. And these economic operators are entrusted with tasks relating to the safety of the product. So the difference here from general the directed to the regulation is that before there was no such requirement to have an actual authorized representative or an EU-based economic operator on each product. Another new requirement is that you need a relevant technical documentation. This we will look at soon a bit more. There's also an obligation for online marketplaces, and they actually need to register today in the SafetyGate portal. The SafetyGate portal is has just launched this functionality. It didn't have that just a couple of weeks ago, but now online marketplaces can and need to register in the SafetyGate portal. There are enhancements of the rules of product recalls. There is a definite requirement of a risk analysis for a consumer product. And this is quite interesting because it's a risk assessment forms the basis of a safe product. So it's a clear indication of what the Commission wants from the product placed on the market. There's also a requirement to have an electronic way of contact to the responsible economic operator. Now, this is not. It's not enough to just use the web address to your website or to your company. You do need either an email address or a direct link to a form that is placed on the website. Cybersecurity is mentioned almost in passing in this regulation, and it's not really clear what kind of enforcement there will be in this case. Regardless what we are having in this regulation, cybersecurity is a big thing that is happening within the EU. We have the Cyber Resilience Act, we have cybersecurity requirements for radio equipment directive or radio equipment products. So many parts within cybersecurity that will happen in the future. So definitely something to have on your radar. Mental health aspects is also included in the risk assessment or as a requirement. So basically you need to consider what would happen, for instance, if a product, for instance, a digital app that would make the user very addictive to that app. Is that something that will be okay in the future? Not sure. So basically, that is one of the tools that the EU Commission wants to add into this regulation to be to do a possible enforcement in the future. Yeah. So what does this mean for you? Well, let's first define a consumer product. A consumer product is a product that is intended to be used by consumers, or a professional product that still is likely to be used by consumers. So even if you have a professional line like a screwdriver or whatnot, then if this product may end up in the hands of a consumer in the future, then it would be considered a consumer product. And this means that both CE mark products and non-CE mark products can fall under this classification, and therefore the GPSR would be relevant for that product. And okay, so what about products in stock or in transit? Products that are on a boat, for instance, in the transition period from now until the next regulation comes into force. Well, basically, there's a clear distinction here. So there's a legal term which is called place on the market. And if a product is placed on the market before the 30th of December, the GPSD applies. If it's placed on the market after the GPSR applies. So basically, regulation directive. And what is the term placed on the market? Well, there is a guide called the Blue Guide that the EU Commission publishes. This means that a product that is placed on the market, well, it's considered to be placed on the market once the manufacturing stage is complete and the product has been offered for sale within the EU. So products that were placed on the market before this date are not subject to the new requirements retroactively, but you need to be careful to confirm that you would be considered to be placed on the market. So basically, you need to. So documentation is key here. So if you want to be sure that you don't get caught in customs or have a problem with this for those products that you think are already placed on the market, then you need to document why you consider this to be a fact. Right, so moving on. So we want to understand the new requirements on the technical file. So first, a risk analysis is mentioned in the GPSR as a requirement. It says here, so before placing products on the market, manufacturers shall carry out an internal risk analysis and draw up technical documentation and so on. Then it comes into the next part here. So product description is mentioned to ensure that one can assess the safety of the product properly. So the second part of this, the same wording here, says that the technical documentation contain at least a general description of product and the essential characteristic relevant for assessing its safety. This means that description may differ from different products depending on the complexity. So you may need, for some products, just a simple picture would be sufficient. For some products with complex functionality, then you need to add also descriptions of software or the electronics of it. So just to make sure that everything is clear. So why does the GPSR say risk analysis instead of risk assessment? So this is a playing with the words here, but bear with me and I'll explain. So basically, it is the same thing, right? So again, the FAQ mentioned says that the manufacturer must document their risk assessment. It doesn't say the risk analysis. However, there are some minor differences here. So a risk assessment, according to this standards, the EN 12100 2010, which is a standard for machinery, but it describes this quite well. It says that a risk assessment is a combination of risk analysis and risk evaluation. And if a risk is not acceptable, there's a need for risk reduction, so reducing or removing the risk. So risk analysis, risk evaluation, and risk reduction. A risk analysis, which is the word within the GPSR, is three things. So you have a determination of the limits of the product, you have the risk identification or identification of hazards, and then you would do a risk estimation. So basically, how hazardous is this actually? So why would we say that the risk analysis would be enough for GPSR products? Well, it says that in the technical documentation, it should be carried out an internal risk analysis. That's for one. Then we have, in the case of complex products, then you may need to take measures to mitigate or eliminate the risks with a risk reduction. But the key thing here is that if there are no identified risks, no further actions are required. So if there are risks, when you do the risk identification, you need to evaluate the risks and determine if there is a need for risk reduction. So basically, just wrap this up. You always have to do a risk analysis, but only if you identify any risks. Then you do the risk estimation, the risk evaluation. Finally, if the risk is not acceptable, you do a risk reduction. So for a product such as a pen, for instance, are there any risks with it? Well, basically, you may find that there are no risks. We don't see any hazards. So then you could conclude that there's no need to do anything more than a risk analysis, and that's it. We will look into that a bit more as well during this webinar, the masterclass. So let's go into an example here to emphasize this even further. Here we have a situation where you have two different metal plates that are supposed to be bolted together. There's an assembly instruction here. We see that there's, you place part 1 on the mounting surface, hold this part at the correct height, and then tighten the bolts to secure the assembly. Quite simple instructions, but as part of the risk assessment, we need to assess if there are any risks with this. And let's say that these two both weigh 20 kilos. Are there any dangers or hazardous situations here? And yes, there definitely is, because 20 kilo plate could easily hurt fingers, pinching. It could topple over. You could get ergonomic hazards such as excessive exertion on your backs or so you can get damaged in that way. So these are risks. So you could either basically do something like this. So you would do a warning, you would enter a cautionary details here on this in your instructions. But basically, what we want to do is to remove the hazards altogether. And simply by adding these two red parts here would basically remove the hazards. So you would no longer have a risk of pinching, you would no longer have a risk of stability issues, you would no longer have the risk of excessive exertion when assembling these components. So basically it's quite easier to do this. And of course the manual would also be much simpler without all the warnings that we need to have as well. There is of course real life scenarios here and I want to share with you one of those. This is a foldable chair incident in Sweden. This is the product. It is a recall. published on the Swedish Consumer Agency website. Basically, what had happened was that the sun share had cut off the tip of the child's finger, of a child's finger. The sunbed, well, this is the actual recall. So Albert Dollarstore AB is recalling chairs in 4 different designs for children and adults. The construction is dangerous and can injure the person sitting in the chair. A child has had the tip of a finger cut off after a chair has collapsed. The chair lacks a safety lock, which means that the wooden rod that regulates the seat height can jump off the recess in the frame. Then the chair falls up accidentally. The person sitting in the chair risks having their fingers crushed or pinched between the wooden parts of the chair. So basically, this, you can see it much clearer now that this recess here is very small, and it's easy to see that this could fall together unexpectedly when you sit in the chair. And how would this, how could this accident and, of course, the recall as well be avoided with a proper risk assessment? Well, the problem that without doing a structured risk analysis is that if you don't know that the risk exists, you won't handle it. So that's the key thing here. The risk identification, where you find the risks, is the most important part. If a risk assessment had been conducted, so basically risk analysis, risk identification, risk reduction, all that, if that had been conducted properly, the accident with the cut-off finger would have been avoided. So we will soon look into the risk assessment method that we teach, and basically we came up with this risk assessment method based on 2 different official documents. So basically, there are no direct description how to do this, more than it just says that you need to do one. So what we've done is to use a standard called ISO 10377 and a regulation called 2019-417. It's an implemented decision. This has guidelines for general product safety within the EU, and the ISO 10377 is called Consumer Product Safety Guidelines for Suppliers. This is an international standard that further explains the concepts of risk analysis and risk reduction. So we will have a look at the template, and we will do a step-by-step walkthrough of this template. Let's see. So this is it. We call this risk assessment of consumer products. And what you do is basically start from the top and walk yourself through here. So, company name, what role do you have? Are you a manufacturer, distributor, or what are you? Name of the product, article number, part number of the product, who is the intended user? And this is an important part. So, intended use and foreseeable misuse. We would need to frame what we do. So basically, we need to understand what the product is, how it's supposed to be used, what foreseeable misuse there can be, and also any additional information such as expected lifetime or so. But without having this information, it's almost impossible to do a structured risk assessment of a product. Do you use revision histories and logs and describe when what has been done and when, as in describing who has who has been a part of the meetings and so on. Now, as a pragmatic approach to this is where we mention the possibility to do a risk assessment, and that's it. Basically, it's a safety declaration. A risk analysis has been performed, and this product or product category is to be considered inherently safe. No significant hazard exists under the conditions described above. So, for instance, if you would supply wall-hung almanacs or a bunch of paper or maybe even a pen, you could go to this section here, mark this as relevant, and then that's it for your product. If you have done a risk analysis and there are more to it, then you would click this box instead. These will be clickable boxes in your template. Something like that. Okay, so in this case, a risk analysis has been performed, and for this product category, the following risk has been identified. Complete the table below. So we'll move into this one here. So we're actually in the risk assessment document now. In the risk assessment, you need to look at all the phases of a product. So in this case, we've only used 2 phases as an example. So unpacking the product and using the product. Here we will see that during the unpacking, we'll see that there's a risk to the folding parts are narrow, form a scissor. Exposed person, well, adults mostly. Finger entrapment. We have the severity, probability, resulting risk, and possible risk reduction. So increase the space between the folding parts so it does not become a scissor. That's a typical way to, as I mentioned with the metal plates, where you do a design change as a first step to reduce or remove a risk. So it's important to consider those things first. Then in usage, the fold lock is not solid enough and may cause the chair to collapse. In this case, for children and adults. Again, finger entrapment. Existing meshes. We do have a fold lock, but it's too weak. And then the severity of this would be high, probability medium, and this would be a high risk. Then we will both do the increase the space and improve the locking mechanism. And finally, if we think that with all these actions we consider it acceptable, then we say, yes, this is acceptable for us. It may not be incorporated into the product yet, but in theory, this would be what we say. So it's acceptable. Yeah, so here we have a picture as well of the product and the risk hazard area. Here we do have some information on how to use the template, and of course the actual determination of the level of risk. So we have the severity, we have the probability, and these are our general guidelines. So if there's a low risk, it's definitely acceptable. It's a medium risk, you may need monitoring or any control or design changes. And if there's a high risk, then we would consider it to be unacceptable and you would need to do immediate actions. Yeah, and then in the end here we have a method description of what this, how we actually came up with this method. So that's that. Yeah, so in this case, we would, this is the actual template or the example we want to show. So you can see how it's used in real life, and is the actual template is available to be downloaded free of charge. Now, we're coming to that here. So you will get a downloadable and editable template. You will also get this the filled out example, the SendShare filled out example, as for your reference. The recording, of course, of this masterclass is available, and here are the links to the regulation and the decision on product safety that we use to create this method of risk assessment. That is it, and thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you soon again. So take care.